Welcome back. All right, so I want to talk about Lindy Ruff, and I've been wanting to talk about Lindy Ruff for weeks, and I thought, well, how should I do this? Well, how I should do it is create a new playlist of coaches and their histories, and we'll start with Lindy Ruff. And yes, there will be discussions of other coaches, great coaches, and all that fun stuff. And I figured, why not approach it in the same way that I do with career videos? And of course, with coaches, the difference between coaching careers and playing careers is that players will retire and they're usually just gone. Coaches get fired and they might come back and they might not. So, yeah, I can absolutely do a coaching career video while a coach is employed because we don't know the future. And Lindy Ruff's an interesting one to start with. He takes over in 97, 98 with Buffalo. He had been part of the Sabres organization for a long time. He played in Buffalo. He was a good player, played both defense and forward in his NHL career, so he knows the game. He really does. He knows the game. And he takes over from Ted Nolan. Now, Ted Nolan's firing was very controversial at the time. Ted Nolan had won the Jack Adams Award. And there was almost nobody who was blaming Ted Nolan for anything going wrong with the Sabres in 96, 97. So Lindy Ruff takes over. He's in a tough spot. He's taking over from a very popular coach, a firing that was very unpopular, and so he has to win people over. That first year in Buffalo, they go 36-19 or 36-29-7. They went 10-5 in the playoffs. They go all the way to the conference finals where they lost in 6 against the Caps. Now the Caps, after winning that series, then got destroyed by Detroit. Buffalo probably would have got destroyed by Detroit as well, but if they'd made it in 98, 99 would have been maybe a little different, right? Because they make it all the way to the final. Their regular season record almost identical, 37-28-17. In the playoffs, 14-7. They lost in the Stanley Cup final in 6 games against Dallas. But Lindy Ruff, very good coach, solid results for him with Buffalo, and a team that if you underrated them going into the playoffs, you regretted it. Now, Hasek will tend to make coaches look pretty good. 35-32-11 record for the Buffalo Sabres that following season, along with the 4 in that fourth column. That, of course, being overtime losses when they added the fourth column for that. So you had your wins, regulation losses, ties, and then your overtime losses. It wasn't a great system, but we still see this from some leagues around the world, including the American Hockey League, which isn't that far away. But they lost in the first round that year in 5 games against Philadelphia. So they did fall back a bit. 2000-2001, the regular season record gets better, 46-35-1. In the playoffs, they were 7-6. They lost in the second round in 7 games against Pittsburgh. So again, Buffalo is a team that's, right in the middle of the pack. They've been to a Stanley Cup final. And there's questions of, so are we going to see a Stanley Cup in Buffalo and, Lindy Ruff being coach and all that? 2001-2002, the team's play falls off a bit. They were 35-35-11-1. 2002-2003, 27-37-10-8 as the Buffalo Sabres go into a pattern that looks similar to the Sabres pattern they've had over the last decade. 2003-2004, they're 37-34-7-4. Now, during the 04-05 season, we don't have a season. So Lindy Ruff and the Sabres get the year off. And with the salary cap and everything as it is, apparently it agreed with Buffalo. So we go back to just 3 columns. Of course, the tie disappears. It becomes the overtime and shootout loss. Buffalo, that first year in the salary cap era, go 52-24-6. In the playoffs, they go 11-7. They lost in the conference final in 7 against Carolina, and Lindy Ruff's awarded the Jack Adams. It's the only time in his coaching career he's been awarded the Jack Adams for Coach of the Year, but he's been in the running other years as well. And it was remarkable to watch how Buffalo turned things around. And the following season was a dream season for them as well. They go 53-22-7 in the playoffs. They're 9-7. They lost in the conference finals in 5 against the Ottawa Senators. And then turmoil hits. So there was discussion of whether or not Daniel Briere and Chris Drury were going to move on. They both did. I think if it had been one or the other, they might have been better off, but both leave. And then the team's record falls apart in 07-08. They're 39-31-12. Certainly not Lindy Ruff's fault, right? Certainly not a situation that reflects on Ruff and his coaching abilities. 2008-2009, the record gets a little better at 41-32-9. 2009-2010, they get back in the playoffs. They're 45-27-10. They lose in 6 in the first round against Boston. And Boston, of course, would lose in the second round against Philly. Now 2010, 2011, they go 43, 29, and 10. They lost in 7 in the playoffs that year against Philadelphia in the first round. So again, 2010, 2011, things are going pretty well, right? On the ice. Off the ice, there are issues. There's bankruptcy. There's ownership changes. There's various changes with general manager and whatnot. And so 2011, 2012, the team goes 39, 32, and 11. Publicly, everybody's saying all these wonderful things about Lindy Ruff. We believe in Lindy Ruff. Lindy Ruff's part of the Buffalo community. At this point, he is one of the longest-serving coaches to have only coached one team in the history of the league. And so it really is remarkable to watch this, see how many years he was in Buffalo, and ask the question, do we sometimes see coaches get fired far too quickly? The answer is yes. There are definitely situations where a team's outside the playoffs, certainly not on the coach, and no, they shouldn't be fired in every case where a team is underperforming. I notice I'm saying not in every case. I'm not saying it shouldn't be done, but I think there are times where either ownership or management in general will pull the trigger a little too fast on changing who's behind the bench. That's why I'm not overly upset nobody's been fired yet this year in the NHL, because which coach do you argue should be fired? Yes, DJ Smith. I should not have asked that question because Sens fans will jump in on that. Not that I'm not sure Sens fans will be watching this, but hey, maybe they are. So 2012-2013 gets off to a rough start. They win their first 2 games, but Buffalo is 6-10-1. Publicly, ownership, management have said all these nice things about Lindy Ruff. They trust, they believe in Lindy Ruff, but they do replace him. So to replace him, they bring up Ron Ralston from Rochester. And he goes 15-11-5 the rest of the way. So the record gets better after Lindy Ruff is fired. Still not a playoff team. And in between when they hired him and they fired him, there were 170 coaches that lost their jobs. Or 170 coaching changes. Sorry, 170 coaching changes. We know coaches do tend to get recycled here and there. But there were 170 incidents of a coach being fired during the time he had been coach of the Buffalo Sabres, showing just how often that happens over 15 years. And this is why when we speculate on which coaches are getting fired, it's because we know it's going to happen, and it's a matter of which one's next. So Dallas hires him. Now, coming into Dallas, it's not the same controversy that he was coming into in Buffalo, where he was replacing the very popular Ted Nolan. That first year in Dallas, they did well. 40-31-11. 2-4 in the playoffs as they lose in 6 in the first round against Anaheim, which is understandable. Anaheim, a pretty darn good team, right? No harm, no foul there. 2014-2015, they went 41-31-10. I believe that was the year that all they had to do was win a game in that last week of the season, and they said no. 2015-2016, they go 50-23-9. They went to the second round. They lost in 7 against the St. Louis Blues, went 7-6 in the playoffs overall. And that game against the Blues, or that series against the Blues, what frustrated me was you had Niemi, you had Lehtinen. They couldn't put together 2 straight really good games. You'd get a good game out of Niemi, you'd get a good game out of Lehtinen, but you wouldn't get multiple good games in a row. And it's a good thing they were only paying each goaltender $4.5 million. So I felt bad for Lindy Ruff based on that as a Dallas fan, knowing that this was a team that could score and had trouble keeping the puck out of its net. Just couldn't get it done. And then it was blamed on Ruff. And I thought, well, how is it Ruff's fault that he has... Like, I remember when Jim Nill went out and got Antti Niemi, and he's like, this will help Lehtinen. And I'm like, how? And I never got an answer. So 2016-2017, his final year coaching Dallas, they go 34-37-11. Their battery in net is still Lehtinen and Niemi. Now, in general, a goaltender with the name Lehtinen, and I've talked about that before... But, I mean, it's not all on Kari Lehtinen either. Honestly, the defense had some issues as well. But when he got fired, I disagreed with it. And there's a video on the channel of me disagreeing with the firing of Lindy Ruff. And I still believe that. I still believe that when he got fired, it was easier to fire Lindy than to fix the problem, which was they did not have goaltenders that they could rely on. And when players on the ice don't have faith in their goaltender, you can see it. You can see it in how they play. This is why when we talk about certain goaltenders getting goal support, there's another angle to look at that from. Maybe players are a little more defensively minded with certain goaltenders in net because they may not have as much faith in that goaltender, right? They may not go for that stretch pass. They may not be as aggressive because they're worried if they turn the puck over, we don't know if he's going to make that save. So at any rate, he gets fired by Dallas. And despite my vociferous disagreement with him being fired by Dallas, which wasn't entirely different from 2012, 2013, when I thought to myself, I don't know how it's Lindy's fault this team isn't very good. But it did take a while for him to get another job. And he's hired by the New Jersey Devils, which I felt at the time was, okay, all right, Lindy gets another shot. It's in New Jersey, though, and this team's not great. That first year, 2020, 2021, just a 56-game schedule, 19, 30, and 7. Now, that division was brutal. New Jersey was dead in the water before that season started. The following year, 2021, 2022, the team's 27, 46, and 9. And I heard all of the complaints about Lindy Ruff. Lindy was the problem. It's all on Lindy. And it didn't sound dissimilar to what I heard towards the end of his time in Dallas. I disagreed with it in Dallas, disagreed with it in New Jersey as well. I agree that part of the game is that coaches get replaced. It's how it works. But I didn't feel like it was fair because I didn't think it was on Lindy. Now, they changed the coaching staff around him. And this year, so far, 2022, 2023, they're 21, 7, and 2. Now, they've lost a few games recently, so the record's not quite as gaudy as it was, which is understandable. It's going to happen. You're going to see teams have their ups and downs through any 82-game schedule. But I think Lindy Ruff is a very good coach. It shouldn't be a controversial opinion to have. It kind of feels like maybe it is. But at any rate, I think he's done a very good job, and I think that he has carved himself a Hall of Fame career as a coach. Not as a player, of course, but as a player, he was very good as well. I can do a video on his playing career because I like the player. I like that whether he was on the blue line or he was playing on the wing, he was a responsible, smart player. There was a little bit of offense there, mostly defense. And yeah, I never had a problem with Lindy Ruff's game as a player. And I've always thought he's a pretty darn good coach. So far, at the time I'm recording this, he's coached 1,661 games in the NHL, which is a lot. 803 wins, also a lot. 637 regulation losses, 78 ties in the National Hockey League, and 143 overtime or shootout losses for him in the NHL. In the playoffs, in 143 games, he has a record of 66 and 54. That's not right. That should be, let me double check that number and we'll fix that. Yeah, the 143 is the overtime or shootout losses. I swear I'm awake. 120 games in the playoffs, 66 and 54 is record there. So that's not bad. That's not bad at all. I think that for Lindy Ruff, he has at least earned himself a job through the rest of the season. If New Jersey makes the playoffs, I would think that earns him a job into next season as well. But if they were to get swept in the first round, does that put it back on Lindy? I do find it interesting, too, that fans went from fire Lindy to sorry Lindy within about a month. And I think it shows that, and this is one thing that I've learned, in covering the league over the last 6 years especially, is those knee-jerk reactions of when you're mad at the coach, the team is probably smart not to just do the fans' bidding right out of the gate. And I know that sounds obvious, but I think there have been times where a knee-jerk reaction is made when it comes to the coaching, especially with coaching, and I think sometimes that's the wrong move. But at any rate, he has a very good record. I think he's a solid coach, but I'd be interested to know your thoughts. One thing that I've always heard with Lindy is, when Lindy's behind the bench, your defensive numbers are just going to suffer. The thing with that is they were pretty good with Buffalo during large stretches here. And again, I've explained with Dallas why I feel that their defensive numbers kept getting worse. And I really felt like it was a lack of faith in their goaltenders who had struggles in the net. But let me know your thoughts, as always, in the comment section below. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through, you just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.